Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler. I'm your host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement, which is a movement dedicated to equipping you and arming you with all of the tools, all of the resources, and all of the knowledge that you need to thrive as a man, however you're showing up. I don't care if you're a young man, 11, 12, 13, 14, or you're 65, 70, 75, 80 years old, whatever path you're on, wherever you are in life. I want to give you resources that are going to help you find more fulfillment and more meaning as a man in a society that seems to embrace and reject the concept of masculinity and manliness. We are the antithesis of that. We are championing, can't say that word, the cause of masculinity and manliness. And today I have a very, very important discussion on the idea of generational legacies and how the vices and virtues of our fathers get passed down to us and how the vices and virtues of ourselves get passed to our sons. And I was introduced to a great quote by a friend of mine, Connor Beaton, whose podcast that I did with him is coming out next week. And it's from Friedrich Nietzsche. He says, "What was silent in the father speaks in the son. And often I found in the son the unveiled secret of the father." Man, that one just really, really hit me. Let me read it again because I want this thing to sink in for you guys, especially if you're a father or will be a father at some point. What was silent in the father speaks in the son. And often I found in the son the unveiled secret of the father. I've been thinking a lot about this in my relationship with my father, who has passed away, unfortunately. And I'm coming to the realization, I made this post on Instagram. And by the way, if you're not following me on Instagram, please do. I'm sharing a lot of hopefully valuable content over there. It's at Ryan Mickler. And I made a post, and I'll go ahead and just read you the caption because I think that it will help land this concept and idea. So here's what I said. "I'm coming to understand that in so many ways, I am just like my father, the same virtues and the same vices. But I don't believe I am destined to follow in his footsteps. I am my own man with my own choices to make. But first, I have had to come to the realization that who he is will always be a part of me. Armed with that knowledge, I am now equipped to choose what I embrace and what I reject. I am trying to choose correctly, if not for myself, for my sons who will, like me, always have a part of their father in them." Guys, I mean, I've got a few other things I want to share with you, obviously, on the subject, but this is crucial that we understand who we are, that we understand where we come from, for better or worse, that we get connected and grounded to who our father was, even if we don't like our fathers or they aren't good people or we have strained relationships. We've got to figure this stuff out for ourselves and for our sons and daughters as well. If we can't break that curse, maybe curse is not the right word. I hope you understand my word choices there. I don't think we're cursed. I don't think, like that post, that we're destined to be a certain way because of the sins of our fathers necessarily. But if we can't break, we'll call it the cycle or the path. If we can't break that, then our children are doomed. And I can't tell you how often I see grown men, myself included, the amount of things I would do for my children that I won't do for myself is an infinite laundry list of items. And if you're not willing to fix and improve yourself for yourself, we better do it for our children. And there's been some things that I've really, really needed to work on in my life, specifically over the past several years and the last few months, that have and I'm going to talk more about these things, but that I have had to come to terms with, get familiar with, try to recognize where they come from so that I don't pass that same baggage onto my children. So I wrote here, and I usually have, the 3 to 5 to 7 parts and frameworks that, is going to help you goal setting or goal planning or have meaningful conversations or whatever. But I just wrote this today. In order to figure out where we come from and who we are as men, and then in order to pass down the things that we want to pass down to our children, there's a 3-part little framework here. Number one is you have to work on the relationship you have with your father. You have to work on the relationship you have with your father. Again, I don't care if it's an estranged relationship. I don't care if even if he's passed away, like my father has. I don't care what it is. You've got to work on the relationship. And I'm not saying that you need to have conversations with him and you need to be best buddies with him. And because how can that happen if you don't know who that is? Or if he's gone, he's dead, he's out of the picture. How can you do that? Well, by understanding him. And I've really worked hard to understand my father's life, why he was the way he was, why he did the things that he did, for good and bad. I mean, there's so many redeeming qualities. I don't want to throw my father under the bus at all. I love my dad. In so many ways, I looked up to him for his creativity, for the way that he could connect with people, for his dedication to his craft. There's a lot of redeeming qualities. And I think one of the problems is that we tend to look up to our fathers so highly that we also maybe even subconsciously look up to or aspire or begin to mimic not only their redeeming qualities, but the characteristics that are less than desirable. And I don't know that I don't think we intentionally do it. I think it's just because we've placed our fathers on this pedestal, this mantle, like idolize, almost worship in a way. And we've placed them on this idol, this mantle. And so we believe that all of their behavior, even subconsciously, is the way that we should behave. And it's not. And that's why as you become a man, you need to begin to make your own choices and separate from the father. That's why we leave the nest. You know, you see 30, 35, 40, 50-year-old men. I don't know about 50-year-olds, but hopefully that's not the case. But I imagine there are a few who are still at home under their father's reign, under their father's rule. You are to go out and create your own kingdom. And when you do, you're your own king. And now you get to dictate the way your life works. You cannot be under your father forever. You have to walk out from his shadow, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't know who he is. What are his vices? What are his virtues? What are his redeeming qualities? What does he struggle with? If you know that, then I think we're more easily able to identify what we struggle with. My father struggled with alcoholism. Guess what? So do I. I had stepfathers come into my life who I learned a lot of anger issues, a lot of passive aggressive communication styles. Guess what? That's the programming that I got as a child. And now I'm realizing, wow, that didn't serve me. But if I'm not aware of it, how can I do that? So how do you work on your relationship with your father? Well, if you have a relationship with your father, I would suggest that you call him up and you ask him about his childhood. You ask him about his worldviews. You ask him about his perspective. You ask him why he did the things that he did. In the conversation I had with Connor, he had 20 questions that I think he said that he asked his father. And one of them, I believe, if I remember correctly, we recorded a week and a half or so ago, was, why did you get a divorce? I believe was the question that he had said that he asked his father. I mean, these are not comfortable conversations, but you need to understand who your father is so you can begin to understand who you are. And now that you're armed with that information, you can make better decisions. So guys, now if he's passed away, you can interview relatives. You can look at journals. You can go through past experiences. You can talk with your mother. There's so many different ways that you can do that to figure out who your father was and how he operated. It's valuable. It's invaluable. So that's the first part. Number two, you've got to work on yourself. Too often we as men just drift to and fro as the doctrine of popular culture pushes us one way or pushes us that way, or our subconscious programming from our fathers play out, right? It's code, it plays out. And then we find ourselves in situations that we're not either entirely comfortable with or that are less than desirable that we want out of. But we created those things for ourselves. So you have to begin to work on yourself. And I just got an email from Andy Frasilla's, him or his team or whoever writes his emails. I don't know if it's him or his team, but he says, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. There's no maintenance mode. And I've found myself in some ways, a lot of ways actually, to be moving backwards over the past several years. I thought I was in maintenance mode. I thought I was on cruise control. I thought I was coasting. I thought I was doing good. But I realize now, no, you were actually slipping backwards and you didn't even recognize or acknowledge it. My eyes were closed. right? It's like, I don't know if this is true, but here's an analogy. Take it for what it's worth. If you're riding in a car, if you're going a certain speed, but your eyes are closed, I don't know if you'd be able to tell if you're going forward or backwards. If you're going fast enough, you could tell because of the weight and the push, but you could feel that it's moving, but you don't know if you're going forward or backwards because your eyes are shut. Open your eyes and really figure out what you're doing with your life, forward or backwards. But I would suggest to you, and I talk about this just about every week, that you get your finances in order. These are not in any particular order, but you get your finances in order. You get your fitness in check. You get your relationships that you have. Start to communicate and have conversations with the people that matter. Get your spirituality in check. Get your mental and emotional health and well-being under control. Begin to work on yourself. But now you actually know what you need to work on because you know who your father is. And so therefore you are that person too. Now, many of us will say, well, I want nothing to do with my father. I don't want to be like my father. Good. You should still know who he is so you can move the other way. And many of you say, I had a great relationship with my father. He's a great man. I want to be just like him. Great. Figure out what he did to make him that way. And then you can replicate those results in your own life. But knowing who your father is going to give you the opportunity to navigate life in a way that makes sense specifically for you, based on what your virtues are, based on what you're good at, based on what you're not good at, based on what temptations and vices you're susceptible to. You can begin to create a life that makes sense. And then the last component, obviously, of this is now you work with your children. And you should always be working with your children. But when I'm talking about this generational legacy that's passed down from our fathers, we can only do that once we know where it comes from. This is why understanding history in the grand scheme of things is so important. Because if we don't understand history, we won't understand what's happened in the past or where we come from or what we're doing or what mistakes we made or what we did right, then we can't replicate the results that we want and repel or reject the circumstances that we aren't interested in as a country, for example. We have to understand history, and it can't be revisionist history. It has to be accurate, an accurate historical reflection of what happened. And it's the same thing with our fathers. Now we can begin to work with our children. And so if you have a vice or you have something you struggle with, let's say it's impatience or an anger issue, it's probably likely that your sons, and again, your daughters, are going to deal with very similar things. And now when you see that behavior being exhibited, because you've examined the relationship with your father and you know it comes from that, and you've examined the relationship you have with yourself, now you can communicate effectively with your son. Hey, son, I can see that you're angry. I can see that you're upset. I can see that this bothers you. I get the same. I get frustrated. I get upset. The way that you're behaving right now is the way that I naturally behave. And let me tell you why it doesn't work. Let me tell you what does work instead. And you can help your sons and daughters navigate this thing we call life successfully in a way that they aren't doomed to repeat the same mistakes that we have and the same mistakes that our fathers have. This is how we break the generational chain. And by the way, we don't need to break all chains. Some of the chains are great. Some of the chains are productive. Some of the chains are favorable results that we want to replicate. Those are the chains you ought to acknowledge and fortify. And then there's other chains where we need to sever. Get the welder out and break those chains apart and sever those chains and let your legacy mean something else. But you have to examine those three areas. What is your relationship with your father? Is it rough? Is it non-existent? Is it violent? Is it abusive? Is it happy? Is it purpose-driven? Is it meaningful? Is it significant? What is the relationship you have with yourself? How do you feel about yourself? And how should you feel? There's a big movement in culture today that says, just be happy with the way you are. No, I don't think you should. I think you should be satisfied with the redeeming qualities of yourself, the things that you've worked on. If you're fit, for example, I think you should be proud of that. But if you're a fat slob, I don't think we should be proud of that. I think we should be ashamed of that. In modern times, you won't hear that. Oh, be ashamed. Oh, shame. No, there's no shame. I mean, how many people do you know? Like, I see some of these people, these men who think they're women, and they're going in, women's showers and bathrooms, and they have absolutely zero shame about it. That's shameful. There is behavior that's shameful. Okay. And I know that's not the current talking points. It's not the current narrative, but you need to be ashamed of some behavior. I certainly am in my life, and I'm coming to terms with that so that I can stop doing that and start making better choices that I'm proud of. So what is the relationship you have with yourself? If you hate yourself, why? Is it because you're out of integrity? As I have been, certainly, and I will at times in my life continue to be. Is it because we're lazy? Is it because we know we're not doing the work that we should be doing? Is it because the results that we've produced around us aren't what we actually want? What is the relationship you have with yourself? And then, of course, the third component, like I said, is what is the relationship you have with your children? Not just like, do you spend time with them, but what conversations are you having? How are you helping them navigate drugs and pornography and social media addiction and woke ideology that we hear permeated throughout schools and everywhere else in culture and society? What is the relationship you have with them? And how are you helping them put on some armor to be able to deal with life? How are you helping them identify their weaknesses that you're familiar with so that they can combat them better than you did? This is what's required. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and they were talking about the statistics of violent, I think it was actually homicides. The statistics of homicides for minors is higher than it's ever been in recorded history. And on the political sides of the aisle, you have one side, this is usually more of a liberal mindset that says, well, we need more government funding, and these people don't have access to the things that they need in order to help them combat violent criminal activity. And then on the right side of the equation, you know, you hear a lot about police reform, and you hear a lot about cracking down tougher on crime. And I'm not going to get into commentary on which is right or which is accurate, but I'll tell you what I do know is right. The answer is not in more government funded programs. The answer is not in cracking down on crime. I mean, we can address those, but that's not the answer. That might be some of the remedies that we need to explore and evaluate. But the answer is what takes place in the home. The answer is how you show up as a father. The answer is how our sons collectively, not just saying your biological children, I'm saying collectively, our sons in this country are being raised. And the fact of the matter is that they're being raised by degenerates, evil, corrupted individuals, or by their peers, and it's Lord of the Flies. We as men need to do a better job fathering our children, fathering our own children. When I say your own, I'm talking about biological, stepchildren, adopted, and foster children. Those are your children. You need to do a better job. I don't want to be accusatory. We need to do a better job, because I'm included here. We need to do a better job. And we also need to do a better job fathering children in the community. And I'm not saying it's my responsibility to father all the children in the community and subvert the role of another father. But if I'm coaching a little league sports team, it's my job to act in a father-like capacity in that context. We can do a better job here. We need to do a better job here. But I'm going to leave you with this quote again from Nietzsche. He says, "What was silent in the Father speaks in the Son. And often I found in the Son the unveiled secret of the Father." Just a couple of words I want to emphasize here. What was silent? Silent, quiet, hidden. It was hidden. It was tucked away. What was silent in the Father speaks in the Son. So now it's no longer silent. Now it's out in the open. So how do we deal with this? We get it out in the open first. And then we deal with it like men so that our children are better equipped to deal with their own stuff. All right, guys. I hope that helps. Join me in this mission. Share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. We got a lot of work to do, obviously. with the relationships we have with our fathers, with ourselves, and with our children. I hope you'll join me in the mission, and I hope you believe in what we're doing. I think you do, and I think that's why this movement is growing. I ask you to continue to share. All right, guys, we will be back next week. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.